Hello, I'm Barbara Altman, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center, and welcome to UO Today. Our guests are Molly Barth and Brian McWhorter, co-directors of Beta Collide, a leading-edge new music ensemble. Described by the Oregonian as ferociously talented, Grammy Award-winning flutist Molly Barth is an active solo, chamber, and orchestral musician specializing in the music of today. As a founding member of the new music sextet 8th Blackbird, Molly toured extensively throughout the world, recorded 4 CDs, and was granted the 2000 Naumburg Chamber Music Award, the 1998, 2000, and 2002 CMA ASCAP Awards for Adventurous Programming, and the first prize at the 1998 Concert Artists Guild International Competition. She is an assistant professor of flute at the University of Oregon and has taught at Willamette University and held residencies at the University of Chicago and at the University of Richmond. Molly holds degrees from the Oberlin College Conservatory of Music, Northwestern University, and the Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. Brian McWhorter is one of the most sought-after performers and teachers of his generation. He is a member of the Meridian Arts Ensemble, which is responsible for many new works for brass and 10 critically acclaimed albums. In addition, he has worked with Sequitur, Elliott Sharp, Ensemble Sospeso, New Jersey Symphony Orchestra, Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, the Barge Music Festival Orchestra, Mark Applebaum, Natalie Merchant, and John Cale of the Velvet Underground. Brian is an assistant professor of trumpet at the University of Oregon and professor of contemporary music at the Manhattan School of Music. He received degrees in music from the University of Oregon and the Juilliard School. Molly and Brian perform together as Beta Collide. The ensemble focuses on the collision of musical art forms, from new complexity to ambient, from lowbrow to highbrow, from radically extended technique to site-specific improvisation, and from popular to the academy. Their projects include collaborators such as composer Mark Applebaum, physicist Amit Goswami, painter Roger Hayes, pianist David Riley, percussionist Philip Patty, and UO composers Robert Keir and Jeffrey Stollett, who has wielded a Wii in one of their performances. Their first recording has been released on Sock Monkey, a multi-artist project featuring the music of Mark Applebaum. Now, after that very long introduction, welcome Molly, welcome Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to talk to us on UO Today.
We're happy to be here.
We're going to have a little musical selection later in the program that Molly will do for us. But I'd love to get a bit of background before we get there. You're both highly accomplished musicians, as that very short intro begins to show. How have the two of you found each other? When did you begin to collaborate?
I moved to Oregon 2.5 years ago, at which point I was living about 2 hours away in Minville, and I heard of Brian's presence in the state because of his interaction with Meridian Arts Ensemble and all the new music that he's done in the past. And so we set up a few meetings just to get to know each other and see what collaborations might be possible in the future. And so out of those meetings came the seeds for Beta Collide.
You list December 2007 as the beginning of Beta Collide, so that means you've been working together for a year and a half, more or less?
Yeah, actually, I think that was their first concert, December 2007, and it was a short concert. But we had started talking, I think, in April of 2007. That might have been the first meeting that we had.
Sounds right.
Actually, at a cafe, trying to figure out if there was a possibility of working on a new music ensemble in this state, in this area.
Clearly there was. You've done it, and it's turning out to be very successful. How did you develop the goals and the kind of the mission statement of the ensemble?
Well, I think it came from our experiences in the new music ensembles that we've been in. Between 8th Blackbird, which is obviously one of the world's greatest new music ensembles, and my involvement in Meridian Arts Ensemble and Sequitur and Ensemble Sospeso and these kinds of things, we've had a taste of what a lot of new music ensembles are doing in this country. Maybe the most representative ensembles of that genre. And I don't think either of us are lacking opinions about how some of those things should go or where they could possibly go, and the role of new music in this country, or the possibilities of new music in this country. And so they came from a reaction to some of those things. What we liked in these ensembles, what we didn't like, and some of the repertoire choices. And I think maybe one of the main things that has interested us from the beginning is this idea of colliding with improvisation, for instance, and new complexity as one of the things that you mentioned. A lot of groups will focus on one or the other, really sort of focusing on more new complexity or the avant-garde or a European strand of avant-garde, where we have sought to try to bring in a lot of different kinds of aesthetics into one concert event or one curatorial event.
Mm-hmm. The name, I'd like to talk about that a little more, because Beta Collide makes it sound as though that collision will be perhaps a little violent, perhaps a little unexpected. What did you have in mind when you called it Collide?
Well, I think the idea of these collisions is, or just collaborations for a less violent form of the word, just being able to collaborate with as many people as possible. And beta, meaning the test phase of computer programming, that sort of thing. So very cutting edge, interdisciplinary. That was kind of what we were getting at with the, what we were getting at with the name Beta Collide.
Yeah, and I like the idea of collide too, as it's a verb. So this experimental collision in action. So somehow, I'm not sure it's grammatically correct to call any ensemble Beta Collide, but there's something about the sound of the name that I like a lot. And we're in the business of sound, so it seemed to be enough justification.
Right, we're not English professors.
Right.
You can leave the parsing of the name to me. That's fine. And beta, of course, as you alluded to, that talks about the testing of new software and so on. So do you think that helps you pull in a new, younger, hipper audience? You think the name works?
I think that the aesthetic that we're going for is aiming to pull in, and does succeed at pulling in an audience that is, well, all ages, for just very, very open-minded and interested in new, fun, experimental things. Working with an artist, for instance, will bring in a more artsy crowd, a more visual art-centric crowd. And that's very appealing to us, to try to get a crossover kind of, it's not a very good word, crossover these days. It implies different things in the music world than I think we're going for.
Right.
But working with Amit Goswami 2 days ago, that attracted a very different crowd than I've ever seen at a music event in Bell Hall, for instance. Yeah. So that sort of idea really appeals to us.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you both brought a lot of experience and a lot of exposure to other new music ensembles, and that this collaboration between the two of you and whomever else you involve is answering your notion of what the role of new music is in contemporary society. So getting back to the mission of Beta Collide, can you articulate what role you're giving new music with your performances?
Sure. It's a work in progress, so it's hard to be really specific. But I think ideally we would be able to highlight some current and contemporary works in the tradition of contemporary music. And for example, that would be a composer would write something and hand it to the ensemble, and then the ensemble realizes it. So hopefully we would be able to work in that medium of showcasing current musical art in a really interesting way. And this is where the collision comes in. This is where we as the directors of Beta Collide, I think, is all the more important. How can we frame this music in a way that will be not watered down for a particular audience, not handing it to them too easily necessarily, but framing it in an interesting way so that all ages, like you mentioned, from all walks of musical life, whether they're involved a lot in music, whether they go to the symphony orchestra every week, or whether they just listen to it, you know, on the sitcoms that they watch. All of them could see, oh, there's something interesting here. The other side of it is bringing, like I said before with the improvisation, there is this whole beautiful and amazing tradition in some esoteric forms of jazz today, and even in the classical genres, of improvising and being right there in the moment with some very interesting language, musically speaking. So is it possible to bridge those two things in a palatable way that would be that would serve the community well, and also I think bring a certain level of hipness to the community, because I think when it comes down to it, a lot of the music that's being created today, whether in strictly speaking contemporary classical music or improvisational works, is very interesting and very hip. So much so that I've never seen an era of pop music that draws so much on contemporary kinds of modalities. It's so interesting to them that they'll use it, for instance, like Radiohead or Bjork will often use colors and sound that are quite contemporary, for lack of a better word. And that is really interesting to me. And I think that that's one of the things that we've come together on when we present any concert, to present it in such a way that we're highlighting the hipness of it and not the kind of droll, too academic, for instance, or dull kinds of, you know, everything that, you know, I don't like those concerts. I don't like to go to like real contemporary music concerts where the musicians are just there, you know, playing the notes on the page and, you know, you want to fall asleep halfway through. I'm tired of that.
Well, we will see that it's a very kinetic, very active kind of musical performance, I think, when we see the clip of your piece, Molly. Molly, you talked about working with a painter. Can you describe how Roger Hayes' work is integrated into your performances?
I would love to. We had 3 opportunities to collaborate with him in concerts, and each time the concert is about an hour long, and Roger's on stage with everyone else, except he's behind his muslin screen. And so what the audience sees at first is just a white, approximately, was it 6 feet?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
6 feet square canvas. All they see is a white canvas. As we start playing our music, they start seeing black and red ink appearing on this canvas. He's behind the screen. So sometimes I think people don't even realize until a little ways into the concert, oh, that's changing. That's not just, you know, a backdrop of some sort. It's actually part of the experience. Even if we've told them there's going to be a painter on stage. People are so drawn to looking at musicians, because that's what they're accustomed to doing, that when they see this art start to form in the context of an hour-long concert, it really he becomes one of the performers as well. And he reacts to each of the pieces very specifically. I can see when I look at the various paintings that he's created, I can see which piece he's working on. There was one piece, a famous piece by John Cage called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, in which the performer is silent for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. The point being to highlight the sounds that inevitably will come out of people rustling, coughing, the hum of the lights and the sound system, those sorts of things. People will just tune into whatever, or just meditate on whatever subject they're thinking of. And his painting was entirely black for that section. And then it became a lot more frilly and colorful in his gestures as we went into music with more notes.
So there's a very important visual dimension, which is not something we associate with concert going. In fact, I have lots of memories of people sitting listening with their eyes closed. They'd be missing a large amount of it if they watched with their eye or listened with their eyes closed on this one.
I believe that's true, yes.
Yeah. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the people you've collaborated with, but I'm really curious about your work with physicist Amit Goswami, for example. Would one of you mind talking a little bit about what you've done with him?
Sure. We just performed with Amit Goswami, who's a theoretical physicist, and his new book is called God is Not Dead, which is dealing with this notion that the new science can actually justify what previous generations have called God, or even in esoteric and spiritual traditions, or a broader consciousness, or this kind of thing. It's very fascinating, and he was maybe most famously known for his work in the film What the Bleep Do We Know, where that whole film deals with that subject in a way that I won't even get into now, but it's a beautiful film and beautiful notions. One of the interesting things to me is it possible that music can provide an ambiance to that kind of lecture? And so what he did, he talked about his new book in a lecture format at a book signing for the release of this new work. And it was my hope that as an ensemble we could be there and sort of provide this ambiance, like I spoke about, to the whole room without even the audience knowing that we were there, perhaps. In fact, we went in the back of the room so they wouldn't necessarily even be focused on us at all. Focused on him, focused on the words, but just having this subtle music come in underneath that sort of provides like a cushion for what he's saying, and maybe even justification. I think one of the things that music can do is soften our minds, especially certain kinds of music. I don't think it's a mistake that when you go to get a massage that there's this sort of very subtle music, right, happening in the room. I think that actually massages our minds in a way, softens our the hardness for sometimes the way that we think during the day, really rigidly black and white. And sometimes that soft music can actually be very soothing. So again, it's like a question for me as a creative musician. Is it possible that we can sort of soften minds when we're listening to other people talk about very spiritual or interesting kinds of things in a way that we would be more open to? So that's what we did. And we actually performed for nearly 60 minutes behind him speaking about his new work. So it's fascinating.
While we're talking to you, Brian, I wanted to ask you another question.
Yeah.
Your materials and the reactions you provoke in people are pretty provocative sometimes and pretty off the wall. So David Stabler of the Oregonian wrote a review of your October 17th concert at the White Stag Building downtown in Portland, and he said he was watching you slowly going insane right in front of his eyes. What was going on that evening?
Well, I was playing a solo piece that I've played a few times now in Oregon, a piece by Robert Erickson, and it's called Krill for solo trumpet. It's one of my favorite pieces. I love the piece because in addition to being very virtuosic and just very difficult to play, it has a character, I think, that's very visceral. And there's something about that I actually love going into the character of any piece in a way more than the notes, more than the actual virtuosity of the piece. I actually like going into the character quite a bit more. And I think that's actually nice for the audience to see. Again, it's a visual element. And so if they see a performer going nuts, if the piece warrants it, I think that's actually, it brings a lot together. So I think that's what he was talking about. I hope that's what he was talking about.
Well, in your own words, your performance style is quantifiably kick-ass. So maybe that's what he was picking up on.
I'm surprised you saw that.
Well, I read carefully. But it gave me an idea of what he might have been reacting to.
That very well may be.
Yeah. Molly, you performed with 8th Blackbird for 10 years, and Brian referred to that ensemble as one of the foremost ensembles in the country. Did that just come to a natural conclusion and you decided to move on?
The group itself is still going quite strong. They're getting tremendous accolades all over the world. And it was a tremendous experience to work with them for 10 years. I can't think of a better way to have spent those 10 years. That said, at this point they're on the road about 9 to 10 months of the year, every year. And that wasn't the lifestyle choice for me. I had determined after being in the group for 10 years. I loved performing with them and all of the, I love the members, you know, it was wonderful. Except I missed my husband, and I wanted to have more diversity in my life as well. I love teaching. I love the lifestyle here in Oregon where I can teach, I can play in Beta Collide, I can play in orchestras, I can do a lot of solo projects. The sky's the limit for me creatively right now, and I just didn't have the time for that when I was in 8th Blackbird. I had time to devote to a very specific field in new music, which was great.
But it's allowed
I needed to move on. And being in 8th Blackbird has allowed me to really figure out what I want to do and have the freedom to do many different things in my subsequent life.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I was looking at the names of the ensembles that you've played with: Fear No Music, Third Angle, New Music Ensemble, and then 8th Blackbird with a very tantalizingly ambiguous name, and now Beta Collide. So that the titles of the ensembles alone, the names, give us a little hint that we're to expect the unexpected, right?
This is true.
On that note, I wanted to ask you if you would introduce the piece that you're going to play for us.
Sure. The piece that I will play for you is titled Zungenspitzentanz, also called Tip of the Tongue Dance by Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. It was written in 1983. It was originally conceived as a small part of an opera for full band, and the soloists are bass baritone singer, trumpet, and piccolo. And then a very small excerpt of this opera was taken out, and 2 versions were created. One, which I will play for you for solo piccolo, and on April 30th, for Beta Collide's next performance, I will perform a version for piccolo, 2 euphoniums, percussion, and synthesizer. It's the same music, just with a lot of other interesting notes around what I'm playing.
So we'll hear it again in this more fully orchestrated form at the April 30th concert?
On the April 30th concert, 8 p.m. in Bell Hall.
Okay, so let's take a quick break, and can't wait to hear it.
Great.
Molly, that was an amazing performance.
Yeah.
A full body performance, perhaps. It's much more than sitting in a chair playing your piccolo. Could you explain a little bit about you use your voice, you use your facial expressions, you have a sort of improvised choreography. Does that change? It must change with every performance.
It does change with every performance to a degree. Stockhausen did set pretty much the motions that he wants, in a general sense. I've performed just the last 3 minutes of a 9-minute long piece. So on April 30th, the people in attendance can hear the entire 9-minute long piece. And I'm going around in a clock face sort of pattern and doing all sorts of interesting movements like that. So.
Well, I think this will entice a lot of people to come and,
I hope so.
and hear you on the 30th. Brian, you want to tell us a little bit more about that program just to
Sure.
close us down today?
Yeah, we're blessed in this area to have Nicholas Isherwood on the faculty at U of O, and he's going to be doing one of Stockhausen's massive works for voice called Capricorn. It's about a half-an-hour solo work for voice that's really incredible and very experimental and this kind of thing. It's probably worth saying that Stockhausen is, while he may sound obscure as a composer, he's really important in the field of new music. He is Europe's John Cage in a certain way. And John Cage and Karlheinz Stockhausen are two interesting composers that have sort of broken away from just this esoteric form of music.
You know, alas, I'm going to have to cut you off there, but that gives us a lot to look forward
Good.
to. Thank you both so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
great to talk to you.
It's wonderful to talk to you.
We've been speaking with Molly Barth and Brian McWhorter, co-directors of Beta Collide Contemporary Music Ensemble. They will be performing on Thursday, April the 30th at 8 p.m. in Bell Hall on the U of O campus. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.